someone might possibly dare to die. But God demonstrates his own love for us while we were still sinners. Christ died for us.
Good morning, everyone. Great morning to be here. I appreciate everybody coming out in the snow. I remember I was driving here and there wasn't an ounce of snow in my cul-de-sac, and then at about 9:30 it just started hitting. So thank you for coming out and being with us this morning. It's always a great day to come and worship the Lord. Dear Evan Hansen is a Broadway play. And the reason I wanted to talk about it, because I was listening to an RDO's performance, which is a school that attends here and uses our buildings on Monday and Tuesday, and some of our kids are in that program. And they were singing this song that I'm going to talk about. But the play is about this young man named Evan, and he struggles with some social anxiety. Well, he is struggling with kind of his purpose in life, and he makes some poor choices. He falls out of a tree, and he breaks his arm. So his counselor tells him that he needs to go and write a letter to himself before his senior year and to find some friends. So he walks up to this young man, Connor, and asks him to sign his cast. Connor signs it, but then it creates this imaginary type of friendship that he starts to act like Connor is his best friend, but he doesn't even know Connor. And then Connor makes some poor decisions and he ends up taking his own life, but now he's caught in this lie. He is supposed to be grieving this close friend of his, but he doesn't even know the person. But the people surrounding him believe that this is one of his dear friends. This is a secular play, but it has a theme that I believe that our churches need to address more often: mental illness. And sometimes in our society that we overlook people, that people feel isolated and alone, that people struggle with their purpose in life. They struggle with finding their own identity. And people feel invisible in this world, that they don't really feel like they belong. And I thought it was so powerful that this play that is written from a worldly perspective captured what Christians need to be viewing: that people have purpose, that people are valuable to God. As we continue our series on the lost and found, I want to look at, as we transition to the found, the idea of this man in Luke chapter 5, verse 12 to 14. Well, Jesus was in one of the towns. A man came along who was covered with leprosy. When he saw Jesus, he fell with his face to the ground and begged him, "Lord, if you are willing, you can make me clean." Jesus reached out his hand and touched the man. "I am willing," he said, "be clean." And immediately the leprosy left him. Then Jesus ordered him, "Don't tell anyone, but go, show yourself to the priest and offer the sacrifices that Moses commanded for your cleansing as a testimony to them." The story starts off with this idea of leprosy, and it starts with 6 incidents that you're going to have Mark kind of focus on in his gospel, the poor behavior of the religious leaders. And then Luke is going to emphasize the good behavior of Jesus, of how Jesus makes a difference in these people's lives. And it comes with this man who has leprosy. And sometimes when we hear that term, we think it's kind of modern day leprosy. It could mean any type of skin disease, but a lot of times it would be incurable, or it would be type of a stigma where they couldn't go to the temple, they couldn't worship with God's people. That this man knows through his leprosy what it feels like to be cast out of society, to be looked down upon, to never really have human touch or human interaction. This is why he's so desperate. In Luke 5:12, while Jesus was in one of the towns, a man came along who was covered with leprosy. The religious leaders believed that you couldn't cure this. It would be like raising somebody from the dead. And they believed that if you got leprosy, it was because you were a sinner. So they're judging him physically and spiritually to be unworthy of personhood. That this person was a nobody in their minds. So when he saw Jesus, he fell with his face to the ground and begged him. Now notice the force of this sentence here. It doesn't mean he just goes to the ground. He falls to the face. He falls to the ground with his face. That as soon as he sees Jesus, he feels so unworthy to be in his presence that he doesn't want to have even a second where it looks like he's breaking the Old Testament law. And he begs him, Lord, if you are willing, you can make me clean. And this is the background. Look at Leviticus chapter 13, verse 45 to 46. This is why this man feels so alone. Anyone with such a defiling disease must wear torn clothes, let their hair be unkept, cover the lower part of their face, and cry out, unclean, unclean. As long as they have the disease, they remain unclean. They must live alone. They must live outside the camp. This is the Old Testament rules and regulations for those who have leprosy. So imagine yourself being in this man's shoes, dealing with leprosy in his life. And any time he comes into contact with anybody, he has to hide his face and scream out, unclean, unclean. And he has to live a life in isolation and alone. And everybody that sees him doesn't want any contact, doesn't want to have any relationship at all. In fact, they judge him as a sinner as well. There's a song that I'm going to have played here. It's a video from the Artios performance, but also from this Broadway. And I was listening to this when Artios was performing it, and it was called You Will Be Found. And I found a YouTube video of it. It's a cappella. I want it to be respectful of everybody. And I was going to read some words, but I thought maybe if I just played this video, you could see kind of the message of what they're talking about this idea of you will be found. And what was so shocking to me, when I first heard the song at Artios, which is a Christian kind of theater group, I thought it was kind of the local brand new K-Love song. I thought it was a Christian song because the theme was so powerful. And I almost looked it up and I realized, wait, this is not even a Christian song, but it sounded so biblical to me. And I thought this song is a great song to kind of talk about our theme of being lost and found. And so if we could pull up this video at this time, we're going to listen to about a minute and a half of it to 2 minutes. And I hope you enjoy this, just because I think it will be so powerful, just to hear the theme of what it's like to be found and to kind of apply it to your Christian walk. Can we play that now?
Have you ever felt like nobody was there? Have you ever felt forgotten in the middle of nowhere? Have you ever felt like you could disappear? Like you could fall, no one would hear. Well, let that lonely feeling wash away. Maybe there's a reason to believe you'll be okay. 'Cause when you don't feel strong enough to stand, you can reach out your hand. And oh, someone will come running, and I know they'll take you home. Even when the dark comes crashing through, when you need a friend to carry you, and when you're broken on the ground, you will be found. So let the sun come streaming in, 'cause you'll reach up and you'll rise again. Lift your head and look around. You will be found. You will be found. You will be found. You will be found.
Appreciate you guys listening to that. When I think about what happens next in the verse here, in Luke chapter 5, verse 13, Jesus finds this leper. For the first time in his life, he is seen and he is touched. Jesus reached out his hand and touched the man. I am willing, he said, be clean. And immediately the leprosy left him. This is breaking Old Testament tradition here. Jesus reaches out to this person and joins him. He doesn't just say, I see you. He says, I will join you. And so those who have judged you, those who consider you to be unclean, I will join you with that. And so he doesn't feel isolated. He doesn't feel alone for the first time in probably countless years, that he is being touched by God. And he's saying that I see you. I am willing to heal you. I'm willing to let you be with me. Mark says the same thing in 1:40 to 41. And a leper came to him, imploring him, and kneeling, said to him, if you will, you can make me clean. Moved with pity, he stretched out his hand and touched him and said to him, I will be clean. This term here, moved with pity, in some translations, they actually say moved with indignation. And some people have commentated, they said that maybe it's because he's angry that this guy touches him. But I don't believe that's what's happening here. It means that he's moved with compassion, that he's moved with his emotion, that he looks at this man and says, this isn't what I created you for. This is not the life I want humanity to be living. This is not what your purpose is. There's so much more. And sometimes people can become so depressed, so sad, so isolated and alone. They just wonder, does anybody else see me? Does anybody else care about me? And when Jesus reaches out and he says, I care for this man that everybody else has shunned. I wonder sometimes in our society and as Christians, who do we overlook? Who do we overlook in this society, in this culture? Because we want to act like we always see people we don't. It's so easy for us in our comfort and in our lifestyles to sit there and interact with the Uber driver and just say, oh, they're just doing a job, or go out to a restaurant and expect people to serve us. But do we see the people who are in front of us? Do we see the people that we interact with in this world? Or are we so caught up in our own little bubbles that we don't realize that people are struggling in this world? And sometimes people just want you to look them to face, eye to eye. And so you acknowledge that they are a person, that they're important. James says this in James 2:2-3. For if a man wearing a gold ring and fine clothing comes into your assembly, and a poor man in shabby clothing also comes in, if you pay attention to the one who wears the fine clothing and say, you sit here in the good place, while you say to the poor man, you stand over there, or you sit down at my feet. Do we not see poor people? Do we not see the person on the side of the road and really see them as a person or a nuisance? I think it's too easy for us to not let people feel like they have been found. But God finds us. We worship a God who comes and looks for us, who lets us know that we are his children, that he cares. Look at Luke 5:14. And he charged him to tell no one, but go, show yourself to the priest and make an offering for your cleansing as Moses commanded, for a proof of them. This is so powerful, but what happens here? Can you imagine this man who had leprosy for countless years, and all of a sudden he is cleansed? He doesn't have any stigma attached, and he gets to walk into that temple. He gets to walk into that synagogue. He walks and stands face to face with that priest and says, I'm somebody. I'm somebody. See me. For the first time in years. Because the priest wouldn't have anything to do with him. He couldn't even come into a place of worship. He wasn't even allowed into the community. And he gets to stand there and say, look at me. And he renders him clean. And Jesus says, go show yourself to the priest, because you have been found. This is the picture of the Ardios performance. I got this picture, and the reason I got this picture because I want you to focus on one of the girls. One of the girls is named Krista, and she's in a wheelchair. She's in a wheelchair, I think, quite permanently. And the reason this song touched me is because she was in the wheelchair singing. And I sat there and I thought, how many times in her life she has probably been overlooked, that people didn't pay her attention because she can't run, she can't play. And sometimes I think those who have handicaps, those who have certain weaknesses that we just don't have, we just overlook them. And I wondered, how many times have people not paid attention to her? And so I sat there and I listened to that song, and I appreciate you let me play that song because it was just so powerful. Hearing her sing it, and she sang it so well. And I couldn't help but put myself in that chair. And I wondered, how would I feel if people would overlook me? And then I thought, we serve a God who doesn't. We serve a Lord who doesn't overlook us because we're all important. God sees us, and we are valuable in God's sight. God finds us. You have an opportunity to respond to this message if you will believe, confess, and repent, be baptized for remission of your sins, rise up out of that water to newness of life. And God is there rejoicing with us because he sees you. He sees you. Who do we need to see in our lives? Why don't you ponder that as we stand and sing the invitation song?